now, last by no means least, we moved to Beirut. It's a reminder that Beirut was very much part of the Levantine world, though in fact Italian merchants are in the 15th century, and indeed many Germans in the 20th. And Tom Young, we're very privileged to have him on a rare visit to London. He is a full-time artist living in Beirut. He's been there for 9 years. He's a trained architect, and he combines painting pictures. He's having an exhibition in Beirut this year, and with architectural activism. Another profoundly important function, or important to us, of the Levantine Heritage Foundation is saving buildings. These incredible 19th century buildings all over the East Mediterranean. And Tom is going to talk to us now about some lost Levantine houses of Beirut. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you to Craig for being the mastermind of much activity, and to Quentin Compton Bishop for your kind invitation. Now I'm going to say a few words about an issue that I care very much about, and it's the precious heritage of Beirut, which is a city that I've lived in for 9 years, as Philip said. And in fact, it might be good to start the discussion connecting the buildings of Beirut with what we've just heard about these connections across the Mediterranean. Now, Lebanese architecture is a sort of hybrid Arabic and Italianate style of architecture, which really has its roots in the reign of Fakhreddin al-Man, who was a very powerful emir in the Ottoman Empire, and he created a sort of semi-autonomous state in the early 17th century. And he actually, we've heard about Germans coming east, and here is a case of someone from the east actually going west and bringing back knowledge, in fact, from the Medicis. Now, Fakhreddin was in fact exiled by the Ottoman Sultan in 1613 and spent 3 years as a guest of the Grand Duke Cosimo II in Tuscany. And there he developed a passion for Italian architecture and brought back with him architects from Italy to Lebanon, or what was to become Lebanon, because back then it was part of the Ottoman Empire, known as Mount Lebanon. And he brought back these architects, and we'll see tonight some of the buildings which are a sort of hybrid Italianate, French and Arabic style mixed with Ottoman urban architecture. Now, this house is a house that I worked in and developed a great passion for. It's probably Beirut's most loved house, most famous house, often called the Pink House, or La Maison Rose in French. Of course, a lot of Lebanese still speak French. Or Beit el-Zahar in Arabic. And Zahar, the colour pink, also relates to a flower, as does the French rose. So I decided to call it the Rose House, to combine the French, Arabic and English, and to give it a new name, which is expressive of its delicate and precious nature. And I worked here, let's see if this works. I worked in the house and around the house for several months in 2014 and 2015. And in this painting, well, you can see how I'm placing the building in its contemporary context, still standing strong somehow, despite this rampant modern development that is going on in the city, which is completely unchecked because there's really no government worth speaking of at all in Lebanon. In fact, the only law really is the desire for financial profit. And, well, the Lebanese are great traders, and that is the strength of Lebanon. But it's also, sometimes it's downfall. In some ways, the painting, for me, expresses the state of Lebanon itself, which is very fragile and delicate, and is surrounded by conflict, as we know, in Syria and often south of the border between Israel and Palestine. Somehow Lebanon, this chaotic, sort of anarchic, yet very liberal place, is hanging on and standing strong despite all of these challenges. And ironically, it's not war that has done most damage to Beirut's architectural fabric. It's actually the relative years of peace since the end of the civil war in 1990 that have done more damage. And that is because of modern development. In 1990, the Directorate General of Antiquities, which is part of the Ministry of Culture, did a survey of heritage buildings in Beirut, and there were 1,200 in 1990, the end of the Civil War. In 2010, they did another survey. 80% had been destroyed. I think last year another survey was done and only 10% remain. So this is a grave issue, and I think it's really worth fighting for. And we need investment, we need help to save these precious places. And as an artist, I believe that we can reinvent these places and give them a new value by transforming them into cultural centres, into places of memory and appreciation for the arts and creativity. Not just for the artistic elites, but also for those less fortunate, the refugee communities and students and children as well. So I'm going to try now and play a short film, but it means, I think, changing the connection from one computer to another. And
how did you, maybe you can tell us how you got into this house, the story of how do you find this house?
Well, exactly. I actually started off this practice of taking over these old buildings or doing deals with the owners because actually I was struggling to find galleries to represent my work, and so I thought, well, why not just make my own galleries, and in doing so actually do something really of value.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I actually explain a fair amount about it here.
And there's going to be a
noticed the house in 2006 when I first came to Lebanon, and I'd always loved the place. I'd always dreamt about it, finding old buildings that were endangered, making work in them and about them, trying to capture the last days and trying to capture the spirit, the atmosphere of these places, this sense of loss, but the sense of the spirit and the life that used to be there, and use art as a way to bring life back into these empty spaces. On Easter Day, we went up the street and found the back door of the building and knocked on the door. I was welcomed by Faisa El-Khazin, the woman whose family have lived here for nearly 50 years. She's moving out this summer. And the fact that Faisa was leaving so soon really propelled me into some kind of action, you know, that I need to go and paint here. I need to find out who is going to buy this place and what's going to happen to it. And I'd like to play a part in a process which saves the building. The house inspired me. I sort of listened to it. It's like a fairy tale house. And I think any child that comes here, it would really encourage them to dream and to imagine, you know, what is possible. The house is precious in this city, full of these big tower blocks going up everywhere, wholesale destruction of heritage, and it needs to be protected. I hope the place will be a beacon for artists and creative people in the city, where they can feel free to express themselves. A common ground where people of all kinds can meet each other and exchange ideas and make the city, hopefully, and the country a better place.
Now, thank you for that. There is actually a much longer film about the house and the former resident who lived there, Faisa El-Khazin. But sadly, we haven't got time for that tonight. But possibly, if I get the chance to speak to you again, I might be able to play that. Because I think it's really worth hearing about. Now I'm just going to have to switch over computers again. Craig, if you can help with that. Thank you.
And Faisa El-Khazin links with our other themes because her family was a family of in Beirut since the 17th century.
Well, actually, Faisa, who you saw glimpses of there, her family was the only family in the Levant to be given a place at the court of Louis XIV. And in fact, in her bedroom was a handwritten letter by Louis XIV, signed by him, granting her family special privileges. She also has several letters from the popes, from various popes, through the centuries to her family, the El-Khazins. So they're a great Levantine family, who kind of classic example of this sort of amazing hybrid mixture of different cultures. And somehow the Lebanese seem to navigate all of these different worlds seamlessly, speaking several languages to this day. And it really makes the city, despite the architectural damage going on, it makes the place really very, very special. Now, I'm going to move on and to what happened next. Well, I spent the summer with Faisa. Sadly, Faisa had to leave. So the great era of her time in the building sadly was coming to an end. And I was incredibly concerned about what was going to happen next. So I discovered that the house was being bought by a developer called Hisham Jarudi. I tracked him down, went to his office, proposed to him that after Faisa left, I take over the building for 3 months, do an exhibition. And I think he thought I'd just put up a few landscapes and have a cocktail party, but that's not what I did at all. it was open for 3 months. I think I estimate about 6,000 people came to the exhibition, and it was the most widely reported cultural story from Lebanon that year around the world, appearing in Le Monde, New York Times, Sydney Times, all over the world. And I collaborated with musicians, with sculptors, my wife, and with theatre performers, and we had all these wonderful events. I taught children from schools and universities as well. And this is the value of these buildings. And since then, the owner has promised to renovate the building. He's made several promises. Basically, because of the massive public interest in the building, he was unable to demolish it. So it's an example of what art and culture can do in arresting this terrible development going on. I think we really can do something. Here on the left you see the opening of the exhibition on the balcony, full of people. In fact, here is Paddy Cochrane, Philip, you might recognise there. And the son of another great Levantine family in Beirut. And so you see the place coming alive again despite its slightly ruinous state. I put floodlighting all over the building, and it was great fun. But since then, despite several promises by the owner, I've been back to the building last year, and there's signs of vandalism and neglect, which is an absolute disgrace, really. And he says he loves the building, and he wants to promise it, but is that love? No, absolutely not. So what I'm trying to do is harness the media as a way to really put him in a place where he has to save it. Possibly he might be unable to do whatever he intends to do with the building and maybe sell it on. So what we have to do is find a new buyer. We have to get people together to save this precious place. Maybe he will fix it, we don't know, but the signs are not good. The building is listed in most courts of law. This would be a crime. Now I'm going to move on to another building, the second building in this talk, and it's another red pink coloured building. And as you see, this particular mansion, which was actually built in the 1920s, in again a kind of hybrid Arabic Venetian palazzo design. As you see, architecturally, it's been very well preserved, but there's another kind of loss going on with this house, and that is the human memory of the place, which in many ways is equally as important as the building itself. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit, but here you see painting that I did of the building superimposed over the place itself. And this is the interior of this magnificent palace. It used to be the British ambassador's residence for many years, and miraculously it survived the Civil War and all the development. And I took up residence in the house for several months. The house is owned by an Islamic orphanage now, which is a big institution in the country, and this institution actually looks after buildings very well. And you can see that I did lots of research here. Philip, you might notice a certain book there. And I discovered that this was the house where a certain British general lived, called General Sir Edward Spears. And Spears was the British minister for the Levant during the Second World War. And it was actually Spears who led the invasion of Lebanon with Charles de Gaulle to defeat the Vichy French, to stop the Nazis from gaining control of the Eastern Mediterranean. And that would have possibly lost the whole war for the Allies had the Nazis been able to take over the Eastern Mediterranean, the North Africa campaign, the oil in Iraq. It all would have gone to the Germans, and that probably would have been it for that, certainly for that theatre of the war. So it was very, very important what Spears did, and this is where he lived. And while Spears was living here, he, having been a great friend of Charles de Gaulle, he then turned against his protégé and developed a great affection for the Lebanese and the Lebanese desire for independence, which had its roots, as you said in the first speaker, really amongst its Christian community. Arab nationalism originally was a Lebanese Christian movement. And so Spears ganged up with the Lebanese independence movement, and eventually the French were removed and Lebanon was granted its independence, really as a result of the extraordinary actions of one man. This is him. And he was very complex and very vain, and in many ways quite arrogant man, but he did some heroic things, and he was a very charismatic individual. And I'm actually making a documentary film about him at the moment, which is one of the reasons I'm in England, is to interview his descendants, his step-grandson. A very complex individual, torn between his British side and his love for France and his French upbringing. But his apotheosis was really to get independence for Lebanon. And he was actually fired by Churchill for doing so, for angering the French too much. And here he is on the front steps of the house in 1942 with his colleagues and his wife, Mary Borden, who was a writer and a pioneering nurse. And here I am on in exactly the same place with Spears's biographer, Max Egremont, who some of you may know. And Max came out and supported the exhibition, which was excellent. Now, the exhibition didn't go really before I come on to that, we'll talk about Spears's, possibly some of the reasons why Spears loved Lebanon so much, is that he seems to have had rather close liaisons with certain Lebanese ladies, including the famous singer Asmahan here. Now Philip will know more about this. And Asmahan was a Druze princess who was a double agent, sometimes spying for the British, went over to the German side, but Spears writes very romantically about her in his memoirs. And he said that her eyes were the same colour green as the sea that you have to cross on the way to paradise, which was pretty amazing for a British general to write that. And I recently tracked down the woman who was his private secretary, and this is her, May Arida. Now, yeah, you may, perhaps it's not surprising he chose her to be his secretary. She's now a 93-year-old lady, very sharp and full of energy and amazing stories. And she has been interviewed for this film. And she actually vouches for this story with Asmahan. She knew all about it. There are other ladies connected to Spears, but here are two notable ones. Now, when I was doing the project, I did a series of portraits of all the people who have either visited or lived in the house over the years. Now, here is General Spears here. Here is the first Prime Minister of Lebanon, Riyad al-Soleh, the first President of Lebanon, Bashar al-Khoury, Charles de Gaulle, various other characters, past and present. And I thought it's very important to tell the story of how this precious little country, Lebanon, became independent. I mean, independence is dubious because, as we've seen recently, Lebanon still isn't genuinely independent. But this is where the story started, in this house. So I thought it's incredibly important to tell this story to particularly children and students, so people have a sense of identity. Now, the man who runs this organisation that owns the house, Khalid Kabani, who used to be Minister of Justice in the Lebanese government, decided to remove all the portraits. He sent security to stop this exhibition from going ahead because it might stir political tensions. So he said. So this is where memory and the history of a building, which is what gives it its character and its life, becomes very contentious. And this was only 2 weeks before the exhibition. So what I did, I had to act very quickly. I painted Spears again, and then painted a flower on top of his head. Actually, this yellow hibiscus is in the garden of the house, but I chose the colour yellow because, as Max Egremont points out in his book, and May Arida says, Spears had a love for yellow ties. And as you, in his honour, I'm wearing one tonight. And this was actually, this particular tie was a gift from a well-known Lebanese historian, Yusuf Mawad. Now, Spears isn't entirely forgotten. The main street in the area is named after him. But no one knows why. Now, I'm going to come on to just the last house. And this one, thank goodness, is not lost. This has been found. This was a house that I'd worked in 2 years ago for several months, and you can see its Italianate influence here, but then the kind of Arabic arch, the interior is an Arabic plan, so it's another hybrid. It's also near the train station, and this is a Swiss French train station design. So it's a complete mix, which is classic Lebanon. Now, I worked here for several months until I discovered that the previous owner had a horrendous plan. He was going to build a road through the house, keeping just the facade, demolish most of the building, and build these hideous towers behind the building. And it was all part of a plan that included the building of an enormous motorway through this beautiful old quarter of Beirut. Now, when I discovered these plans, I was disturbed and shocked, and so I left the project. There was no way, I was having nothing to do with that. So I went to several government activists, the Ministry of Culture, the Director General of Antiquities, and I launched a campaign to stop this from happening. And 2 years later, I heard that there was a new owner. And now, why was there a new owner? Because the old owner had been stopped from carrying out his plan. So thank goodness it happened. And as a result, we were invited back to the house. We've been using the house as a place to teach Syrian refugees here, these children, and also other children from the area. And here is the new owner, Nabil Delis, and his British wife. And they really care about heritage. And we opened the exhibition on December the 13th, 2017, so just a month ago. And we're developing an idea that the place will become a place for arts and culture and theatre, a place for artists to stay, and a place for artists to collaborate. An arts club based on the Chelsea Arts Club, several arts clubs. Here is Noor, my wife, and her fantastic sculpture here, chandelier. Here is a performance artist, echoing memories of the house. And here is the owner with a previous resident of the house who was so happy to come back. Again, a lady who grew up in the house in the 1950s finally came back home, where she was brought together with her father. This is a portrait that I painted. Now, on to the final and building. This is the So Far Grand Hotel, and it's owned by the Cochrane family, and this hopefully will be my new project, opening in September. It's a fantastic, it's a beautiful, grand hotel up in the mountains, which has been ruined since the Civil War. And we're going to open it as a place for art and concerts in September. So there is hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom, for that reminder of the importance of architecture in the Levant and the many echoes of what's happened to buildings in Istanbul and Izmir. Now, time for questions. Any questions for any of our brilliant speakers tonight? Yes?
I was just interested in the Genoese, well, I'm interested in all the talks, but the Genoese talk was fascinating, and I wondered when and how the Genoese control of trade in and out of the Black Sea and towards the Mediterranean and the other direction started to wane. I mean, was there a Genoese military force based on Pera which helped them maintain their control, and if so, what happened to it, and or did they have a collaboration with the Sultanate which allowed them to maintain some sort of regular traffic between the two and take their taxes from it?
Are we taking questions? Or?
Yes.
So no military presence, completely pragmatic traders, continuing on their trading relationships, continuing on their modus operandi under the Ottomans. How do we see a waning of the Genoese dominance, and how does that happen? Well, yes, we see it with the rise of Venice, the Venetian-Ottoman wars, and the kind of the supremacy of the Venice connection really there. So there's an inter-Italian republic dynamic going on, but also most of the Genoese colonies and most of the Genoese trade has been dominated, taken over by the administration of the Ottomans. So the middlemen might be still Italian Genoese, but the administration of the wider trade in goods and the taxation is by the Ottomans. So it becomes an Ottoman Genoese trade. It is assimilated into the Ottoman system. So we then see an Ottoman-Venetian conflict going on until the mid-15th to 16th centuries. Not too much into the 16th century, but more into the early 16th century. So no military, interestingly, but just the know-how of maritime routes and the know-how of shipping as well. The Ottomans are used to this when it comes to shipping.
More questions? Yes, Zainab?
I want to ask Dr. Philip, this Ottoman Lloyd newspaper, how much of it is intact? Where do we find it?
There's a partial set in the Preußische Staatsbibliothek in Berlin, and there's a full set in the German Archaeological Institute in Istanbul, which is in the German consulate. And it's sitting in very badly bound in a wooden cabinet, so next to a window. It's closed, but with a full sun on it, and it's also facing it's of Marmara, so it's got the sun and the damp and everything on it. So I've been emailing on and off with the German Archaeological Institute if nothing could be done to digitize that, but no results yet. But I'm on the case.
And also another quick question. There's 60-something boxes. What can you tell us a little bit more about that project? Like, is it only your project?
No, it's accessible. So anyone, and I can give you the details. Anyone can rummage around in it. As far as I understand, it has just not been catalogued. They don't know what's in it. There's remind me afterwards, and I can send you the document. There was a very short piece of 2 or 3 pages in Welt des Islams, which is the Islamic Studies, Middle East Area Studies journal in Germany, about someone who had a quick look what's in there, and it's personal papers and letters, and a lot of it is actually his field notes, Hartmann's field notes from when he was looking through the archives in both Istanbul and in Salonika and in Izmir, and he also went back to Beirut and Aleppo a couple of times.
So it's very precious.
Yes, and I hope it's better preserved. But, the Oriental Institute at Halle is very good and quite keen, so I'm hopeful.
Any other questions? And it was great to have the reminder from Tom of Spear's empires weren't just oppressing the Levant, their rivalries could be used to gain independence, as Anglo-French rivalry gained the independence of Lebanon and Syria, and Genoese-Venetian rivalry helped the Byzantines and the Ottomans. Well, thank you very much to all our 3 speakers, and we will now adjourn upstairs. Thank you very much.